Welcome to our video on Washington lease and landlord tenant laws. As a landlord, it's essential to know your rights and responsibilities to manage your rental property well. With that in mind, here are some important landlord-tenant laws in the Evergreen State. The lease agreement is the foundation of the landlord-tenant relationship. It's a legally binding contract between a landlord and tenant that sets the terms of the rental relationship. The most common type of lease agreement is a one-year fixed-term lease that terminates at the end of the lease term. This is often referred to as a standard lease agreement. Beyond the basic terms of the lease, there are some additional things that Washington landlords must include in their lease. Landlords must provide tenants with the name and contact information of any agents authorized to enter the property. If the landlord doesn't live in the state, the lease must name an agent that lives in the county where the property is located. A name and address for legal notices must also be included. Washington landlords must provide tenants with a copy of a fire protection and safety information sheet. Tenants must also be provided with a mold information pamphlet discussing the dangers associated with mold. If you collect a security deposit, you must provide tenants with a copy of a move-in checklist and a security deposit receipt. The receipt must state the name and address of the financial institution where it's being held, and the terms for how funds will be returned. If any fees are mentioned in the lease agreement that are non-refundable, the lease must clearly state that the fee is not refundable. Pursuant to federal law, if a property was built before 1978, tenants must be provided with a lead-based paint disclosure and pamphlet.
Next, let's talk about key landlord-tenant laws in Washington. There is no limit on the amount Washington landlords may charge for the security deposit. However, landlords must hold the security deposit in a Washington state account and provide tenants with a security deposit receipt. The deposit must be returned within 30 days of the end of the tenancy. Landlords must provide tenants with at least 48 hours notice before entering the property for maintenance and repairs. Only 1 day's notice is required for showings. Any late fees must be clearly stated in the lease agreement and must be reasonable. A fee of $20 or 20% of the late rent amount, whichever is greater, is considered reasonable. Washington landlords may require tenants to get renters insurance, and we always encourage landlords to do this. Landlords may charge a return payment fee of $40 or the face value of the bad check, whichever is less. All Washington landlords should be familiar with lease termination and renewal laws. Fixed-term leases terminate at the end of the term, unless otherwise stated in the lease agreement. Periodic leases can be terminated by either party with 20 days written notice. Washington does not impose a limit on how much a landlord can increase rent. However, the lease should specify the procedures and notice requirements for rent increases.
Washington landlords must keep rental units in a safe and habitable condition. This includes ensuring essential services like plumbing, heating, and electricity function correctly. Tenants must promptly notify landlords of any necessary repairs. Tenants in Washington have specific rights, including the right to make repairs and subtract the cost from rent if the landlord fails to make necessary repairs. Retaliation by the landlord against tenants is strictly prohibited. If a tenant fails to pay rent or violates the lease agreement, the landlord may start the eviction process. When doing so, landlords must adhere strictly to Washington law. Landlords can never resort to self-help eviction methods, such as changing locks or shutting off utilities. Congratulations, you're now familiar with key lease laws and you're ready to create your Washington lease. While the lease laws might sound complicated, keep in mind that our Washington lease automatically includes all required disclosures and gives you state assist tips as you create your lease. Before you turn over possession of your rental, make sure you've screened all tenants, have an executed Washington lease agreement, and you've collected the entire security deposit and first month's rent. As you manage your rental, remember that we have over 400 property management forms, including Washington state-specific forms. Visit easylandlordforms.com to start your tenant screening. Create a Washington lease agreement that's guaranteed to comply with all Washington lease laws and access Washington property management forms.